Am I the only one that feels like Todd McFarland deserves his own documentary or his own live action film? And you might be wondering who exactly is meant to play Todd McFarland. Well, I think it should be a combination, or it should be a toss up between, I don't know, like Leonardo DiCaprio or The Rock. Like, can we get a combination of that? Maybe like Keanu Reeves? Maybe he goes around just wrecking and murdering Hasbro sales associates with his bare hands, or maybe in some sequences he takes him out with like an actual pencil. Just throwing it out there, okay? I have plenty of ideas. I would love to see some of these action films, and I think we desperately need a Todd McFarlane origin story. But anyways, all jokes aside, let's get serious here for a second. I actually thought that we would talk about something that I've kind of been spitballing for quite some time, and it's interesting because this is like the first thought that popped into my brain the moment that I found out that Mattel was going to officially take over the DC license. As I continue to repeat, this isn't 100% confirmed. However, we do know for a fact that Mattel is going to take over the DC license. We don't know if that means that McFarlane is going to be able to somehow have certain lines or sublines. We just don't know at the moment. But let's just assume that Mattel is taking 100% over the license and that they're moving on from McFarlane. The first thought that came to my mind was, why didn't Beast Kingdom take over the line? I know for the most part they mostly make action figures that are a little bit taller than the McFarlane line. Usually I think they're like closer to the 8 to 8.5 inch mark compared to McFarlane, which I think is closer to like the 1/10 scale. A lot of his like Batman action figures were like 7.5 inches, whereas in the Beast Kingdom are closer to like 8.5. So it's definitely a much bigger size. From my understanding, they're imported figures, or they get imported from overseas. There's way more accessories, way more attention to detail, better sculpt, heavier plastic, all that. But obviously with that comes a higher price point. These action figures are usually much more expensive than McFarlane action figures. And look, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I would say like 80% of the time, imported action figures are completely overrated. Like, I get it, Mafex, SH, Mesco, all of these figures are better than Marvel Legends or DC Multiverse or whatever Mattel offerings are available. I get it, they're better, but by how much? I think that's the real question. I don't think they're like astronomically better in terms of quality, in terms of accessory and articulation. I've often said it before and I'll say it again. I've actually bought multiple SH Figuarts that articulate just as much as the Marvel Legends counterparts, just because they have a few extra accessories and they use different, type of plastic, I guess, is why you're paying 2 to 3 times the amount of a regular figure that you can purchase at retail here. Now, I should clarify that doesn't necessarily mean that this OM is like an imported action figure line. I, don't know that for a fact. And by the way, I think the distinction between like a regular homegrown line as to the difference between like an imported figure line, I think it's just like the imported figures are solely sold overseas. Like, most of them have their headquarters across the ocean, whereas in like Hasbro, McFarlane, all of these other lines, they're essentially, yes, they are manufactured overseas, but they're actually, the retail is here in the States, or mostly in the States. They're still sold in other countries, but most of the fan base, most of the foundation is here in the US. I think that's really the only distinction. Usually you have to pay way more to import action figures that are not sold here, and that's why there's a little bit of a markup, whereas in like, let's say they probably retail for about $60 overseas, but then once you bring them over and convert it and you have to pay for fees and things of that nature, it's probably closer to about like $80 to $90. Now, I should clarify, these figures are there's much more plastic, they're bigger, they're wider, they're heftier, they come with a few extra accessories, wired capes everywhere, wired, or I should say cloth goods everywhere, whether it's like the Nightmare Batman with the cloth jacket. I believe like the Dark Knight Returns Superman as well as Batman actually have like an all-out cloth suit. There's also a few other figures, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but there's at least a couple of different figures that have light up features, like their eyes will light up, other little electronic features here and there. Now, it is worth mentioning that some of these characters or some of the figures that are offered from Beast Kingdom actually don't have the rights for some of the likeness of some of these actors and actresses. Now, I'm not sure why that is. You have, for example, the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman that doesn't look like Gal Gadot at all. Honestly, if I were her, I would be, severely offended at the representation of her. And honestly, I've said this before. I don't know why they don't come together on a deal. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in my mind. Like, if you're the actor or the actress, they're just going to very poorly represent you when they finally decide to release that particular character. Usually what they do, and I'm going to just assume that they get the rights from Warner Bros. To make the action figures based on whatever live action project or just whatever source material they want to. They pay for that up front, but then they have to go through the actors and the actresses for the likeness of each individual character. And I'm going to just assume that Beast Kingdom just didn't want to go through that entire process, or they did and Gal Gadot just wanted too much money. But I think it's kind of like, it doesn't really make sense in my mind. If you're Gal Gadot, why wouldn't you want yourself represented the best way that you possibly can in action figure form? But then at the same time, I think if you're the OM, you're probably playing it really tough. Like, you don't want to just go all out and give them a great figure. You kind of want them to think that you're going to do a really bad job with the face sculpt, and then maybe that will entice them to hand out the license. But I will say, overall, these figures are really well done. They're really well manufactured. It's a shame to me that they don't have larger, bigger action figures available, or if they do, they're probably out of production. I know they have like a Darkseid action figure that looks phenomenal, but that one I think is scarce, kind of difficult to find. And then even if you're able to find it, it's way up there in price point. I think this one goes for about 130 to 140, but it actually fits in with like a DC Multiverse action figure from McFarland, because usually Darkseid tends to be bigger, heftier. It depends on the source material, but some Darkseids are drawn a little bit bigger than some other iterations. So it just depends on, what comic book run you're reading. But I think a character like that could fit in. Maybe a Doomsday action figure. I'm not sure if they've done a Doomsday thus far, but that would be a great addition. A Killer Croc, a Clayface, so many other characters that are bigger that can be represented, like Man-Bat, for example. I know McFarlane did a really big deluxe Man-Bat action figure, which I think was like within the first or second year of him having the license. Bane, so on and so forth. I think characters like that could, very easily port into a DC Multiverse display. And I feel like that was a huge missed opportunity on their end. At least some people would maybe pick some of these figures up, even if they were just giant fans of the DC Multiverse. But as I said, I think I was kind of interested to see whether they would throw their hat in the ring. But I'm just going to assume that it probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're a smaller OM. They clearly knew that they were not going to be able to compete with what McFarlane does at the moment, which is, he just releases a ton of action figures on a yearly basis, and I don't think that they felt confident enough to be able to produce that many figures. Their facilities or whoever it is that they have a contract with probably has a much smaller capability, and they just wouldn't be able to release figures as consistently, which is one of the bigger issues. I've already talked about Jaded Toys incessantly, but it's one of the bigger things holding them back. I think their production is not quite where it needs to be at. You look at their Street Fighter line, for example. We've known of every single character since like maybe 3 years ago when they had it on display, and yet it still feels like we're receiving one figure like every 6 or 7 months. And so it's crazy how how slow they are to go into production and actually mass produce these figures. And I think Beast Kingdom would probably run into that same exact issue. But look, the question is going to arise here whether some people are willing to jump onto Beast Kingdom now that McFarlane is going to lose a license. At least you have a little bit of consistency there. We don't know how long they're going to have the license for, but at least for the foreseeable future, it appears that they will continue to make DC action figures. So you can kind of go back, pick up some of the older catalog, and then, go forward. Whereas with the McFarlane DC Multiverse, you have a very small window here. You can go back and pick up some of the original figures that he released, but a lot of them were like based on modern comic books. They were based on like the DC Metals universe and things of that nature that are only relevant to modern day collectors and modern day comic book readers. but it took them a while to actually get into like the classic iterations of Batman, Superman, you know, Joker, Wonder Woman, so on and so forth. And so I feel like maybe some people would be tempted or will be tempted to sell off their DC Multiverse collection line from McFarlane, and they could either jump back into Mattel and start collecting from there, you know, pick up some older Mattel action figures and then start once they actually pick up, you know, officially pick up the DC license. Or there may be some people that are just looking for something new, something fresh, something creative. It is a little bit more expensive. I see a lot of the figures going from anywhere from like 50 to about $100. I think it depends on the actor, it depends on the franchise, the series. Now I will say there is a little bit of a crossover here. I saw, for example, the new Reeves Batman universe being thrown up there for pre-order. We've already seen the Dark Knight trilogy as well. Some figures have popped up. The Dark Knight Returns, for example, they also have those available. All of those have already been mass produced by McFarlane, as well as, you know, Mesco, and or I believe it was Moffix that had some of these figures. So it's just going to be really interesting going forward how people go about making those choices. Are they going to stick it out with DC Multiverse, you know, try to get as many figures as they possibly can, and then refresh it with Mattel? Or are they going to try to flesh out their display as much as they possibly can before McFarlane decides, or before McFarlane, you know, completely loses the DC license here? Now, as I said before, I think, you know, the budget or the money that's going into these figures is pretty well spent, at least on the surface. I haven't purchased any of these figures. I do plan in the foreseeable future to pick up a couple of these and review them for you guys, but I will say a lot of them do have some really neat features. I already mentioned the light up features. I believe the Superman from The Dark Knight Returns has a light up feature for his eyes. The Batman from The Dark Knight Returns also has some light up eyes, which I think are going to display incredibly well in whatever display scenario you can offer, whether that's in like a glass display case or on a bookshelf somewhere. I think those would just look absolutely phenomenal. Some of these come with extra head sculpts or face plates. I think that's kind of like the newer trend. Even McFarlane has picked up the idea of using face plates rather than head sculpts, which I think is good on both sides. Like for people that want affordable action figures, usually the face plates can offer a variety without breaking the bank. And then for McFarlane, clearly he doesn't have to go in there, design a brand new head sculpt. You can just kind of, you know, design the little face plate, which I'm assuming, you know, is better for budgetary constraints and things of that nature. I believe the armored Batman from The Dark Knight Returns also has a light up feature for his eyes, which I think is, you know, just absolutely brilliant. It also comes with like a damaged head sculpt, which again looks really well done, looks really well crafted for, and obviously it makes sense because of the price point, but still I think they're offering quite a bit for what you're paying for. They even have like the new Justice League Ben Affleck Batman up for pre-order, or you can actually you know, purchase it through their website, and the figure looks really good. You know, I love the design, I love the sculpt work in there, and the likeness to Ben Affleck is, you know, just really well represented. They also even have like special edition Batman action figures. They have like an anniversary Michael Keaton version where he has, you know, some really shiny colors everywhere. He has like really shiny gray. He has some blue that really pops out and makes him, you know, stand out in your display. And as I said, it's an anniversary action figure, which I think is just really cool and iconic. They also have, as I already said, the Reeves Batman, as well as the Dark Knight trilogy Batman. I think they have like 2 or 3 different iterations for him. And I think I've noticed a little bit here, and I don't know if this is consistent throughout the line, but at least it appears that most of these figures have unique body molds. I'm going to assume that, like, for example, the anniversary Michael Keaton Batman is probably just a reuse of an older Batman. But for example, if you're comparing like the you know, the Ben Affleck Batman to the Reeves Batman, each of them appear to have mostly unique body molds, unique head sculpts, unique features. Maybe some accessories make it onto other releases, but for the most part, it appears that like head to toe, most of these figures are brand new. And then, for example, they have the Henry Cavill Justice League Superman, which is very difficult to find. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the original color palette for the Henry Cavill McFarlane action figure is way up there in price. I think last time I checked it was about like $50 to $60. I think there's like a black suited version that's a little bit more affordable, But yeah, I think the original color palette with the blue, I think, was going for about like $50 to $60. It might be higher, it might be lower by now. But if I'm, still going off of those prices, like $60 for a McFarlane action figure, might as well just go for the Beast Kingdom version. You get way more accessories, you get way more attention to detail, and I think it's just a really interesting line that not a lot of people have been paying attention to. And I'll be brutally honest, I'll count myself in that. I might have seen like a reveal here or there, or if I saw one of these go on sale and it popped up on my radar, but I really didn't dig too deep into this line, into this manufacturer, and I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised. This is really cool. They have other licenses that they work on. They even do Disney stuff. I did see like a Woody, a Buzz Lightyear. They even have a Sauron action figure from the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the Lord of the Rings franchise. And I did talk about these for like I believe it was like a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive video way back in the day. But for the most part, I just kind of talked about them in passing. It wasn't like really in-depth. I didn't look at their entire catalog. I didn't look at all the figures that they had available. But I have to say, I am pleasantly surprised and very excited for the future. This may be a line that I try out here and there. I'll maybe purchase a figure here, purchase one there, and just kind of, display it next to my DC Multiverse. See if it kind of fits in. As I said, that one is closer. I think officially in the description, they say they're a 1/9 scale action figure line, which isn't really too far off from the 1/10 scale or the 7-inch line from McFarlane. So I definitely feel like these could maybe mesh together. We'll see, only time will tell. But as I said, very exciting to see some other lines picking up the DC license, and especially in this time of turmoil. As I said, there might be like a small little fraction of time where we may not have a lot of DC collectibles. Like maybe McFarlane is already handing over the DC license to Mattel, and then maybe Mattel still has to go into production with their figures. Like there's maybe like a grace period where we don't have a lot of collectibles, and maybe Beast Kingdom could be like a good alternative just to try out. You can buy a figure here or there, see if you enjoy it, see if you like it, and then move on from there. That's probably what I'm going to do. I'll keep you guys updated if I do purchase any of these figures. I'll throw it up on the channel reviewer for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. And yeah, as always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling content, you guys can always stay tuned. We do this pretty consistently. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. I know there are a ton of people out there with broken hearts that are just dehydrated from all the tears that they've shed. They have, mucus running down their mustaches all the time because McFarlane has to, give up the DC license. But always think positive. I think that's probably the best message that I can give you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Stay safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.